I first came to Loreto in 1985, and I think I've missed 1 year visiting here since then. It was a place I fell in love with. The first time I came here, I was young enough and broke enough that I slept outdoors, and that was after trying many different other places on my way down the peninsula. I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about the Ocean Foundation, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about the context of travel and tourism sustainability that led all of us, any of us, to be involved in the villages of Loreto Bay and be inspired by the vision that was put forward for us all in this place, and then how we came to create the Loreto Bay Foundation that was connected to this, right? All of the things that Aaron mentioned were funded through that foundation. And any of you who bought into Founders in particular, you paid money into this foundation, right? There was a 1% line item on your closing. You may have been so happy that day that you don't remember it. But 1% of your sale went to the Ocean Foundation's Loreto Bay Foundation account. And folks who resold, that went to the foundation as well. And that allowed, between 2004 and 2009, for us to provide grants to support community organizations in Loreto. So,
do they still collect on sales?
That's actually a good question, and I'll circle back to that a little bit on the way here. There's some legal issues that are ones that I need to learn about, and we all need to learn about. So as Aaron mentioned, the Ocean Foundation is just now, last year, 10 years old. We are a $5 million a year public foundation. We work with many individual donors, corporate donors, and some government agencies to do their philanthropy for them. This is this sort of intermediary job, which was the same as what we did here in Loreto. So we're trying to support those who actually do the work. We don't claim that we're the ones doing the work ourselves. Our focus is primarily ocean, hence our name. And so we're dealing with coastal and ocean conservation all over the world, the people who depend upon it, the animals, everything else like that, that are the things that we all are dependent upon. The ecosystem services, whether it's seagrass or mangroves that slow down storm surges, or fish to eat. Tourism is the biggest industry on our planet. It is even bigger, particularly when you talk about employment, than the oil and gas industry. And we see this as a potential benefit, but it's also a potential harm. It creates a lot of challenges for us in upsetting natural systems, loss of culture, and other impacts, right? Anytime you build anything, you're replacing something that was there before, and if you're not careful, you end up with, Los Cabos, where, everything beautiful can't be seen anymore. It also can be very focused on short-term gains, where a developer will come in, build something, flip it over to Marriott, and move on, right? And so they're not thinking about what's this going to matter to the community 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. They're thinking about their build, flip, and move. And so we're not thinking about how it matters to other things that are in that place, that attracted us in the first place to come to a place like Loreto. Those natural features, the archaeology, the evidence of previous cultures who were here, and the people who've lived in this town literally for hundreds of years. We don't see, whether it's Mexico, the United States, or many other countries in the world, a connection between the agencies who foster tourism development and natural resource protection. We don't see a connection between fisheries and natural resource protection in many countries. And so there's this disconnect and therefore a lack of leadership trying to integrate how do you do tourism right. You know, this is the biggest industry in the world, and therefore there's a lot of demand for it. It's going to happen. So the question is, how do we do it right? So our idea is, you know, and part of the idea behind the vision of the Villages of Loreto Bay was that sustainability as a central organizing core was the way to do this. And, you know, how do we ensure that what we build now is good for now, but also good for the future? How can we make sure that things that are built are as efficient as they can be and not burning up more, you know, electricity than is needed? Which is why, you know, the Founders Village and other things here have natural evaporative cooling and natural venting of the kitchens, and all of these puzzle pieces were thought in advance as part of the design features for sustainability. We're, you know, sitting here in front of a national marine park. It is one of the most rich, biodiverse places on the planet. The channel between here and the islands is deep, rich, and that's why you have so much wildlife feeding here, from blue whales all the way down. And figuring out how to keep that way while the tourism happens on land is part of our job if we're thinking ahead for sustainability. Obviously, one of the most important things that happens with regard to the ocean and tourism is fishing, whether it's going out and doing recreational fishing or going to a restaurant and ordering fish. I'm sure all of you have heard over and again that most of our oceans are overfished. Most commercial species have been overfished. We have problems with our fisheries everywhere. And so figuring out how do we do the scale right in a place like Loreto, which still has abundance, so that if we are consuming fish, we're doing it in a way that is not going to run down the quality and the quantities of fish that we have here. We're working on a project called Smart Fish that is trying to help fishermen catch their fish and handle that fish better so that when they go to sell it, they can get a higher price. Now that may not please all of you when you go to a restaurant and order your fish, but the fish will be in better shape, look better, taste better, and the fishermen will make a little bit more money off of each fish and have to catch fewer of them. And that's our ultimate goal. Right? Eco Alianza that Aaron mentioned has a program helping make sure that restaurants are catching and selling locally caught fish. Right? So that's the other piece of this. If we figure out how to catch at the right scale, and we make sure we're dealing with fishermen we know and who are participating, we all win. So buy local, you know, eat things that are caught local. You know, this quality piece of reducing waste is a big piece of this. Sustainable development, I've already mentioned. By the way, I'm going through these slides fairly quickly, and in a little bit, when I get to the Loreto Bay Foundation, there's some slides with lots of words on them, and I will go through those really quickly. But I'm going to make a PDF of this and send it to Rick Simmons and Aaron so that they can post it along with some of the other things that they posted for us, so that anybody who wants to go back and look at any of this stuff, it'll be there for you. One thing I wanted to note here, and I'll come back to this at the end, is aesthetic beauty. Okay? The traditional definition of sustainable development that you've always heard was a stool with 3 legs: environment, economy, and society or socio-cultural issues. I believe that stool actually has a 4th leg, which is aesthetic beauty. If you don't preserve the aesthetic beauty, the ocean vista, the mountain vistas, that made this place attractive in the first place, you are going to lose a piece of what you came here for, right? And so if we think about classic buildings in Greece or Rome, they didn't get torn down, right? Because there's an aesthetic that's part of those buildings. And I believe that the architects and designers of the village of Loreto Bay were trying for an aesthetic of a set of buildings that achieved that with the right proportions, color schemes, design features that made it a beautiful place. And I think we, can all be proud of the result. Not every vision of the developer was achieved, but we can be proud of many pieces of the result here. So the Ocean Foundation has worked with this developer. We've also worked with others. We've worked with JetBlue on sustainable tourism in the Caribbean. We're working to advise the UN on the state of the marine environment. And we're working with the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board on resorts and lodging sustainability as an advisor. But what we did here was in the earliest days of the Ocean Foundation, and it's one of the things that we're very proud of, which was this arrangement where we helped the developer, gave advice, told them when they were doing something wrong, and we're an independent third party handling money that was coming from the development in order to make grants. We replicated it in St. Kitts in the Caribbean, and we're now working with a new project in the Dominican Republic. This, in each of these cases, as you could tell from the logos there, we created a separate foundation that had its own name, whether it's the Loreto Bay Foundation or the St. Kitts Foundation, and had this design where a percentage of revenue from the development would come to the foundation so that you had a continual resource for support of the community. And this gave us independence from the government, the developer, and from the nonprofits. It allowed us to be transparent, accountable, and careful as we did our work. So we were a grant maker. Between 2004 and 2009, we gave away $1.2 million of your money in Loreto. We helped convene stakeholders to talk about issues related to mining, water, energy, whale watching, park management, fishing. I already mentioned we were an advisor. I would come here on a regular basis and I would go back and tell the developer, your worker housing looks awful. Your conditions for workers are awful. You need to do something about it. We also looked at the bats in the building. We looked at the relocation of trees and other plants on this property and gave advice wherever we could. And part of that was paying attention to the place, but also to the promises that TSD made when it put forward the vision for the village of Loreto Bay. And the goal obviously is to figure out how do we make sure we protect the culture, the resources, minimize negative impacts, and find solutions to all of these things. We are not trying to make this some sort of exclusive, awful place that only a few get to experience, right? The goal has to be an open community, not an exclusive gated community. So the Loreto Bay Company made a tremendous number of promises to all of us to only develop 3,000 of 8,000 acres, do renewable energy, a walkable community, no automobiles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Limited footprint, engage with the community, and it fulfilled some of those, right? And it fulfilled as many as it could as it kept going on, but it also made a lot of mistakes and underestimated how hard I think it would be to accomplish a lot of its vision. And that occasionally I think happens with visionaries. And this list just goes on and on and on about energy savings and energy production and renewable energy production, et cetera, et cetera. You know, how the golf courses were going to be renovated, how they were going to cooperate with government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of those promises was 1% for the community, right? And so the master development agreement between Fonatur, which is the Mexican agency for the fomentation of tourism, and TSD includes a requirement that sales of property in this development have 1% go to the Loreto Bay Foundation managed by the Ocean Foundation. Okay? Now, that master development agreement, going back to your question, is still in place. Nothing has changed. As this property has moved from TSD to Homex to, to Citibank, then to Homex, then to Grupo Carso, the master development hasn't changed, and I suspect none of them want to change it because of the real estate prices in the original master development agreement. Okay? But the homeowners association.
I got to stop you just.
Yep.
Homex has never taken over this development, or has Carso. So we're on our own. TSD's out. So really, that agreement essentially has gone by the board as far as everybody in this room is concerned.
That's where I was actually going to go next.
Okay, thank you.
The homeowners association that you all belong to is completely and totally independent and is self-managing and has accomplished a tremendous, tremendous amount. I mean, I've been visiting here, talking to people and understanding what you all have helped to finish some of the things that were left undone when you moved in. Buildings were undone, utilities that weren't connected, weren't done right, and you all have done that yourselves without the help of any of these folks, right? The question is, what is going to happen with real estate if this master development agreement is still the way that any future development in the map that I showed earlier is going to take place, right? When this was all designed to implement that 1% clause in the master development agreement, the trust deeds for all of the condos and homes here have a provision that 1% is in perpetuity. That if you bought here and you paid 1%, when you sell, your buyer will find a line item that 1% should go to the foundation, right? That has not been enforced by us since the recession, right? We weren't going to force people whose properties were underwater to have to also see 1% go out of their pocket, right? The CC&Rs for the condo regime, same thing. There's a whole set of provisions written in there. And then you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand the homeowners association has voted away the 1% clause as far as it has the legal power to do so, right? And this is where the ultimate answer to your question comes in, which is the homeowners association's power goes here, and the Fonatur and real estate master development agreement goes here, and I certainly don't know the answer to the question about what that looks like going forward. I would happily receive percentages of revenue from real estate sales here. I would happily return to managing grants to benefit the community from that revenue stream. But we're in this sort of gray area of unknown right now. So this financing mechanism, I've essentially already explained here with the trust agreement and all of these sorts of pieces, but I thought I would provide this information for you to refer to in the future. And I've already mentioned how much money that 1% generated between 2004 and 2009. Yeah,
The numbers on that don't add up. If you've got 1.2 million, that would be 120 million in sales. And there was more like 350 million in sales.
yeah.
Did the developer not pay the 1%?
They did not always pay the 1%. We had a very hard time, forcing these things to be done. As you can imagine, as a nonprofit going into the legal regime in Mexico and demanding payment for something like this is very, very difficult, right? As the developer got into deeper and deeper financial trouble, borrowed from Citibank, and used that money to try and finish properties that it had set the cost per square foot on too low to begin with, it dug itself into a deeper and deeper hole, and the writing was on the wall that we weren't going to get any more revenue, right? And I think the combination of that bad planning on their part, the recession, the fear of drug trafficking, et cetera, all meant that, this revenue stream that was designed to be in perpetuity wasn't. So the second layer, which I was going to mention here, and I have a couple slides on, and again, you can read these later, is we negotiated with Fonatura and the developer about what the bylaws of the foundation would be and what we were to focus on and how we were to prioritize the spending of the foundation, right? So that there was an engagement with priorities and understanding where this money should go and identifying us as an independent third party who would live up to those expectations. So these just go on, and there was a priority for the marine park, there was a priority for education, et cetera, and so it just keeps on going and ongoing here. So we got that money and we made grants. We made grants to Animalandia. We made grants for a pride campaign to get folks to care about their national park here. We even made a grant to the fire department in Loreto to obtain jaws of life in order to cut people out of automobile accidents, and paid for them to be trained in that, right? I'm sure you all have heard of these internados where the kids from ranches can come and stay and go to school. We ended up supporting, I think, 4 of those from Lehui all the way into Loreto with equipment, uniforms, a bus, et cetera, and it's just been a really rewarding piece of helping the community be lifted in a way, right? If you go to many other small fishing villages in Mexico, you're likely to be chased by street dogs. You're also likely to see different kinds of social inequities. And here we were able to get things started to limit those things. And the neat thing is, even though the money dried up, many of those things have continued. Animalandia is still standing and still spaying and neutering animals. The drug and alcohol rehabilitation clinic is still there. The Casa Hogar women's shelter, I believe, is still there. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. And Caritas as well. So many of these things have gone. The second photograph there, the Pride campaign, is still going on, right? When we first came here, many, not all, people in Loreto saw the park as an imposition on them from Mexico City that was taking away their rights, taking away their liberties, taking away all sorts of things. They weren't proud of their park, right? And so by working through using the chocolate clam as a symbol, the NGOs we gave grants to, Rico Alianza Rare and others, worked to educate folks about why the park was important, why it was good for the future of the community, and I believe that pride turned a corner and is still in place, and people brag about having a park here now rather than feeling bad about it. So we were able to take the revenue that came from here and work with schools. Aaron mentioned the hospital, the park I've already mentioned. We also had Hurricane John come through here during that window of time, and so we helped supply all the fuel for an organization called Baja Bush Pilots to airlift water and food into the mountains and ranchos behind here, right? That's what we did with your money. So that is a great example. So we gave money to the national park, sometimes for fuel, sometimes for uniforms, binoculars, helping them have the enforcement capacity that they never had. And one of those enforcements ended up being against the developer here for damaging mangroves. Okay? So the developer's gift to the foundation gave a gift to the park, which then enforced the law. And that's, you know, if we're really thinking about the environment and the park, what we want to do is have the rule of law, right? We want to have the rule of law enforced. I already mentioned that we've attempted to replicate this in St. Kitts and a couple of other locations, and are now doing a project in the Dominican Republic. And we've tried to learn lessons regarding the legal documents, regarding choices that can be made and done better. And I'm sorry that you all suffered as guinea pigs in some ways. I will close with this slide again and remind us that, you know, if we have a community that is safer because there are no street dogs, that is healthier because there is a medical service and a drug and rehab clinic, and we have a better environment, economic values go up. The value of your homes here are better when that is in place. The environment is healthier, the food that comes from the environment is there. The beauty remains, and the town is not overwhelmed, right? If any of you were in town yesterday when the cruise ship came in and the town felt overwhelmed, right? It felt like the tourists had taken over, right? And figuring out how to keep a town, and have a development like this that is of a scale that is not intimidating, that is not, you know, high-rise, blocking views, et cetera, is part of what one's goal has to be if you're doing sustainability. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and then I believe we can all go down to the wine bar and have the conversation over wine as well.